I'm Jeff Gould, America's storyteller. I like to interview people on interesting topics and especially things that I have no knowledge of, but am curious about. So I don't really understand data centers. I don't really understand the need to store all of this stuff. I really don't understand why it takes so much energy and how it puts out so much heat and what is going on with China and Bitcoins and zoning rights, and all of that stuff is fascinating to me. Scott Sandal is our guest today. He's an expert on the subject, and you couldn't ask for a more bare bones guy, a ranch kid from out the western part of our state who grew up on the ranch and somehow, through some circuitous way, found himself in this industry. So he explains things in an easy to understand way. Now, like, subscribe, comment. There's a lot of stuff you'll see out there that is made up or manufactured or altered through AI. This is not the purpose of this show. It's just me talking to people who I'm interested in because I learn interesting things. If you like this format, like, subscribe, comment, help a brother out. All right, enjoy the interview. Hello. Well, sometimes you run into issues that seem really way over our skis to understand, and I'm going to bring in somebody who can explain it, but then you go, oh, okay, this guy's going to be a little dismissive, perhaps. And this is what I like about our conversation we'll have with Scott, because he is, his story is amazing. He's just a guy from the middle of nowhere who has landed into unusual circumstances and now finds himself in the heady waters of data farms or data centers. How could that even happen to a kid from a ranch? But we're going to talk to Scott, so you'll get to figure out who he is as a person. And I'm just going to ask tons of questions because I don't even know if I've said the name right. Is it data farms or data centers? Scott, what would you prefer that I call them?
Just data centers is typically
Okay.
what they're mostly referred to, and the multiple different types. But data centers, sure.
Okay. So Scott is basically a guy who grew up in what we would call flyover land in most of the country. He's a ranch kid. He grew up on a ranch. I mean, literally raising cows and calves, went to not a one-room schoolhouse. No, he was twice that. It was a two-room schoolhouse. So grew up rural and in a town called Faith. It just, you can't write this, right? Anyway, he is working in the cattle industry. And one of the things that you could do with feeder cattle or cattle at auction at the time is you could put something around their neck. And that necklace would have a chip on it, would tell you all the details of the cow and calf. Well, it seemed like a good idea. Didn't work at the time, but that got him down a road of technology. And now, for whatever reason, now this guy travels all over the place, fixing, uh, building, doing the maintenance and the correction and the upkeep on data centers. Did I get that correct, Scott?
Yeah, for the most part, did a
Yeah.
wonderful job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're a dad and a grandpa. Aren't you also on the school board too? Is that right?
I am. I
Yeah.
am. Yes, I
Yeah.
have 9 years on the school board in Lennox.
Right.
Correct.
Okay. All
Mhm.
right. So I thought I saw a halo over your head. I was just trying to confirm your service to the community remains. Okay. So,
Not at all.
Scott, let's, now you'll
You
have a
bet.
chance to ask me I'm going to ask you tons of questions.
Yeah.
You get a chance to ask me one question and only one question. So save that up. We'll get that to the end of the show. But I want to talk to you first about these warm-up questions. Did you get the Jeopardy sheet? So
I
you get a
did.
chance to pick okay, what is your Jeopardy question?
So mine is the one person in history that you would want to have an honest conversation with.
Okay, so that's from You Are History. Yes. And that is for 400. You Are History for 400. If you could have an honest conversation with anyone in history, who would it be?
For me, that is very simple, and that would be Jesus, because regardless of your belief, he is one of the most influential humans to ever walked this earth. And the movement that has followed his existence is undeniable, right? So that would be the one person in history that I would want to sit down and have a honest conversation with about
What's your
all the
first
events.
what's your first question gonna be? I got to admit, I would be a little intimidated.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. But
yeah,
as you meet people, yep, you learn that people are people, right?
right.
That everybody does certain things the same way. And my first question to Jesus would just be, did you, as a child growing up, believe this to be true?
Oh, right. When was the revelation of yourself being a son of God? How did that process
How
work?
did that come to
Did
be?
did you know it immediately, or were you reading the scriptures as you did as a kid and go like, "Whoop, whoop, 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 wait a minute. I'm descended from David. Wait a
Yep.
minute. All of these things seem to be talking about me." And then, to your point, also in that scripture, he realizes that he is going to be sacrificed, right?
hmm
You know, oh,
hmm
he's talked about as the lamb that is sacrificed for the slaughter. You go, oh boy, I don't know that I want to read that part of Isaiah, but wow,
Yeah.
that is
Yep.
right.
Well,
Right. And then steeling himself for that journey.
yes.
Well,
So all.
I'm told this story that, like a Soviet soldier in 1983, they have no concept of Jesus at that time. And a missionary says, "Would you know who Jesus is?" And he says, "I don't know. Who's that?" And then he says, "What year is it?" And he says, 1983. Well, that's why it is 1983. And this kind of blew the soldier's mind.
hmm
But
hmm
one could argue, and I don't think there'd be any argument, that if you want to measure the impact of a person's life, the fact that they name time after you. I mean, I don't
Yep.
think, Scott, no offense to you, but after your demise, we will not rewind the clock and call it, 1
Correct.
SS, 1 year after Scott Sandal was alive. I don't think that's going to happen, right?
Correct. Correct. And that is
Huh.
why, and I'm not one that can recite a ton of scripture. I'm not, but the most influential person that I can think of ever to walk the planet is that
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that's why I pick that in your
Yeah. Well, that's a good
Jeopardy
question.
questions. Love it.
Yeah.
Love
So,
it.
okay. Very good. So you know about data centers. And by
Correct.
the way, I said data farms. Are they also called data farms? Is that a derogatory term?
Server
Sir.
farms that were there known for several years were server farms and then data centers, and most, frequently everybody refers to them as data centers moving into the world of hyperscale. Um, and then there's the other type that is Bitcoin mining type of facilities, but they're all generally the same concept. It's just what are they utilized for to deliver compute to whom at the end of the day.
Well, congratulations. I understood 20% of what you said. So good for me. So that's my job here today is
No
to
worries.
wind this way back to the elementary school level.
You bet.
um, when you load stuff up to the cloud, I think we all know it doesn't go to a cloud. It goes to like a building somewhere where it's stored on this hard drive. And when I thought about, data centers, that's kind of what I was thinking they were. They were just places that stored bunches of information. Is
Yep.
that the way they started?
Absolutely, that's the way they started. It started, I started my career, if you want to go all the way back to early 90s, right? I'm a early 90s graduate from high school out west in western South Dakota. Um, a graduate, but I went to work for a bank here in Sioux Falls where I was a night operator, where we had a room where the mainframe was, and then a couple racks of client servers to deliver email and shared folders where, instead of saving a document on my laptop, I saved it in the shared folder down in the basement, right? So that if my laptop died, it was still accessible tomorrow.
And this
Same with
thing
the
would
main.
be about maybe the size of a refrigerator, perhaps. Is that right? Or
Yeah,
were they? Yeah.
little smaller
Okay.
than a refrigerator, but
Yeah.
usually 24, 19 inches wide,
Mhm.
maybe 24, 36 inches deep. They're getting a little bigger, but
They
usually
used to
call it
call
a
them bigger
19-inch
than a
rack.
bread box, but nobody knows what a bread box is. So I decided to upgrade. Okay. So
Yep.
continue. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. No, so that's where I started my early day careers, and in that process, I I got an internship. So I was working as a night operator to pay my way through college, and then got an internship through the summer to do what was called cold, which was computer output to laser disc, which meant instead of the bankers getting a green bar set of paper printed out and put on their desk, they would log into the terminal and go through all the reports on the terminal. So we're now saving paper, right? Um, and that's where really kind of for me, the early days of computer room was what had been called back then, started to move into a larger room, like the data center area, which then ventured out to, if you have one room, you need somewhere else as a backup. So that if I have, at the time, I went to work at Gateway in in Sioux City, North Sioux City, when they were still operational there. And in the data center, we had our document management storage system. So everything that came in, all the purchase orders, we scan those and store those in the server area in the data center. But if you have them stored one place, you need to store them someplace else just in case something happens to that location. So
Yeah,
they're
so
created that.
back in the print area, when you'd
Mm-hmm.
write a contract, you'd say press hard because there's 4 copies, right?
Yep. Yep.
And you'd press hard, and that carbon copy would go through, and the pink one would go over here, and the yellow one would go over here, and the white one would go over here, and quintuplet,
Yep.
quadruplicate. And I imagine the same thing is true. I mean, we think about like 9/11 when that entire companies were lost because their data was lost, and everybody says, "What if?" And
Yep.
now everybody wants their data saved 2 places, 3 places. How many? What's the general rule of thumb for backing up their data?
I refer to it as a data hoarder. We save data everywhere. I
Yeah.
get an email and I save that attachment on my local system, then I accidentally save it somewhere else, and I'm sure the other person who sent it to me, they have it saved in 2 places, plus the redundancy of the backup systems that go. So we just have a mess of storing anything and everything, and
Well,
that's
I'll just
probably
say,
for me.
frustratingly for me, when I try to delete an email, it says archive. Well, I
Yep.
don't want to archive it. I want to delete it. Nope, it's archived. I've gone to, my smartphone, which I won't say its name because it'll leap to life, and I will say delete unread emails because I just, if I see it,
Yep.
chances are I am not going to read it. I just want to delete it.
Yep.
And it will say, "Oh, sorry, I can't do that."
Yes.
And then when I take my phone, and these are small amounts of data, but smile, click, 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 click. Okay, one of these is probably going to be with nobody blinking. And then I go, "Oh, that's a nice one." I don't delete the duplicates because why not? And then I think that the powers that be, they like that because they can just charge me storage. For example, and they seem to know the exact timing of this. When I'm under the most amount of stress with the least time constraints, it says, "Hey, you're out of data. For $9 a month, you can go to Gabillabytes." And I don't want a Gabillabytes.
Yep.
But for me to not get a Gabillabytes, I got to go through all of my stuff and delete it. Okay. It's only $9 a month. I don't need, it's too much of a headache.
Yep.
That, I feel, describes the average person.
Yep, and we've all ventured into what would be considered the digital age and didn't know we were headed there. Right? That's what has happened over the last, 20 to 30 years of my lifetime is we in this current age and era have created the digital age that we are now dependent upon for multiple reasons that requires this infrastructure in order to support our habits, hobbies, likes, whatever it might be, right? It's just a must. And so, how do we go about continuing down the path to have the necessary infrastructure
So
in place to support our own hobbies and habits,
I'll
right?
ask, is there a virtual Mary Kondo who just kind of goes, "So you don't need this. I'm throwing this away. You didn't look at it for 4 years. I'm throwing it away." I mean, is there a system that just systematically tosses your garbage data?
There are tools out there, like you take your pictures, for example, where there are cleanup utilities that will go in and disk
Okay.
defragmentation, and there are definitely tools out there. But for the most common people, we don't do that, right? We get our
Yeah.
Facebook, or we get our Meta, we get our social media accounts, and we just love to post, like, share, whatever it might be, and create more and more and more bytes of storage, whether it's small, but you take that across, you know, billions of people, millions of people, and that just adds up. And
So
that's why, to me, your platforms, a lot of those social platforms, are free, because that's where they drive. As long as the human behavior is to continue to drive those platforms and they're free, we'll continue to need more of this
so
ability.
so this is a pie. This I'm drawing a pie
Hmm.
with my hands. What how big a slice of the pie on data centers is from average people like you and I?
Traditionally, all of it, right? It's banks, healthcare, everything that's making our world. And that's the digital age. We like to go in, and instead of having the paper chart show up at the hospital, they can just log into the system next to us in
Well, I
the.
won't I won't talk about businesses. We'll just call them their own animal. We'll leave banks and healthcare aside. I'm just
Sure.
talking about, how much of this in the machine is just average people like you and
Oh,
me who don't know how to throw things away.
um, boy, that's a really good question, Jeff. Is to what actual percentage of storage, if we are only using that, um, what percent of the facilities that exist or should need to exist would be there? I don't have that data point. That would be a
So,
really good one to
and the
figure out.
reason I bring it up, let's just say that
Hmm.
we're worried about oil consumption, right? And somebody
Yep.
says, well, if we all drove our car, half the amount of time, we would cut that. And then somebody else says, yeah, but people only are using 5% of the oil, the rest of it. And you go like,
Hmm.
what's the
Hmm.
point?
Hmm.
What's the point if it's only
Hmm.
5% of the pie? That's why I was asking the question
Yeah.
because now, what?
I,
So
I
these,
would take it. I would take it a little bit like this: is that for the last 19 years or 25 years that I've been in this industry in different ways, shapes, or forms, is you just add more. There's never been really a need to assess it. We just add more. So if I need more, I go get more, right? And there's been a methodology where we manage, a data center manager will manage to the 5 nines, meaning if I'm up my building, my customers can access their information, whether it be an end user or an enterprise or healthcare or research, whatever it is, as long as they can access that through whatever UI, whether it's a web or user interface, right? If I'm up 99.99% of the time, I'm doing a good job. And that's been the way of the world
wait
in
a
this
minute.
industry for a long time.
If I'm up,
Yep.
I don't even know what does that even mean.
That's five. That's what we call the 5 nines. 99.999% of the time, when you click get, so you go to your bank account and you click get, the data comes to you. Right? Remember? Yep.
99.999% of the time.
So there was an era in there where you'd go to a bank or you'd go somewhere and they'd be like, "Oh, my computers are down, can't access it." Right? So the goal is for that to only happen 99.99% of the time, to always be up, meaning only
Right.
0.001% of the time are your systems down. So to get there, right, we just kept building, and we build a little more, another DR system, another data
Okay,
center.
so let me just stop for a second.
You bet.
If there's a failure rate in there,
Yep.
you're saying that's because there's not a big enough data farm nearby.
Just redundancy. So if
Yeah.
somebody accidentally pulls a power cord somewhere, right, the data is accessible at some other location that it can still be accessible. And if it's not there, it's not. So some places will have 3 or 4 redundant locations that it's accessible, because we as humans want our stuff now, right? We don't want to wait. And so I, as an operator, have to provide that ability. What has happened in recent years is, okay, well, that's not good enough. We need to be a little more proactive in efficiencies of these facilities. I can't just go get net new space somewhere to build out more redundancy or more storage or whatever. I can't expand. I have to be more prudent about what I have. And that's where I've been able to secure with our companies a really nice share in knowledge in the marketplace, is just sitting down with people and understanding their current processes, data center managers, their current processes, and how do they manage those facilities better in all of their processes with their people, the products they support, um, and the environments that are logging in to that particular data center location.
So let's just use my analogy of
Mhm.
storage as being like a storage shed out
Mhm.
back.
Yep.
And I'm a hoarder. I just can't stop
Yep.
hoarding stuff. So I'm going to put up a 20 by 40 Lester building. That should be plenty. Oh, it's full. Let's put up
Yep.
another Lester building. Let's put up let's put up a Reeves building. Let's get all and they're all kind of dotted around my place. And then somebody says, well, what a waste of efficiencies. Why don't you tear all of these down and put up a bigger one? Or people are breaking into that back shed. Maybe you should put a fence around it. And basically, what I'm hearing is that there really wasn't a lot of foresight into how we were going to build these storages. We kind of made it up as we went along, and now it's a little bit of a hot mess. Is that a fair analogy?
Absolutely. I'll give you an analogy around. So I grew up as we mentioned as a ranch kid out in western South Dakota. Um, and two loving parents. I was the youngest of seven adopted children, so we made do with what we had to do on the ranch. And my father on the ranch was, you could consider him a sort of a hoarder because he would keep metals of all types of things.
Sure.
However,
You
he could
never know when you'll need it. You'll never
he could
know.
take that
Yeah.
metal and turn it into some of the most magical stuff with a
Right. Right.
blowtorch and a welder and a
Yeah.
grinder, right?
Yeah.
That's just the way that they operated. But now we sit around and look at all that stuff. My siblings, now I do have one brother and probably a brother-in-law that could take that and do similar type stuff. I cannot, right? I couldn't grind myself through a piece of metal if I tried. And so we look at that pile now and remember to all the things that our father was able to do, right? But to us, it's junk, right? So what are we going to do with all that stuff that he had all those years? And bless his soul, right? Is what are we going to do, right? And that's what we have now in data in the digital world is you have people saving anything and everything because one day I might be able to reuse that for something, but never do. And by the time you go to try to reuse it, you've lost it, right? Or it's out of date. But we don't delete it. We don't throw it away. We just save it there for a little bit longer because we might need it, right? So I look at it just that's human behavior, and that continues to drive a lot of this demand that we as consumers could look at doing better ourselves, and then data centers can look at doing things better too. That's not out of the question.
Just a side question. Somebody
Yeah.
told me once that a thumb drive eventually just starts losing data just by sitting around. Is that true? I've heard that they just yeah.
I have never experienced that myself. I mean, that
Okay.
could be some cases how it's stored, where if it breaks down, and I do know that myself have been caught up in telling people, here's a hard drive that you should purchase, right? Back in maybe the early 2000s, if you buy this, 4 gig hard drive, you are never ever going to need more. Have definitely got caught up in that with my mother-in-law reminds me, and she's a huge photographer, has made wonderful scrapbooks for all of our kids. And we always joke about the time I tell her, yes, this is the exact system you should buy because you will never need more than that. Boy, was I wrong in that statement, right? That's just the way we grow.
A
That
good friend of mine, when he was, and this is 40 years ago, so he was a kid when he just got started on this.
Mhm.
There was a group of companies, and they said, we need some storage. And he drove to this town and the storage. Anyway, long story. He said the same thing. You will never need anything more than this baby.
Yep.
And 16 megabytes was it. Now, that's laughable,
Yep.
except that terabytes. I mean, if you had a terabyte, wow, my goodness, but now everything has a terabyte. Probably should have 2 terabytes.
Yep.
I think what's 1,000 times bigger than a terabyte? And is it a petabyte? Is that what it is?
Yeah, petabyte, and then I
And
don't
then
know.
there's something 1,000 times bigger than
You,
that.
you keep going and going and going up the thousand by thousand by thousand, and there's a whole chart system for that. Uh, I myself, in the last couple of years, going into that and going back to the data center world, there's a new conference that has hit and is growing rapidly by attendees. Is YADA, and YADA byte or YADA
And
is
that's YADA, yada.
YOTTA.
Oh, I was thinking it
YOTTA.
was more like Seinfeld. Yada, yada, yada.
Not like Yoda,
Yada,
yada.
yada.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep. Not
YOTTA.
yep, yada.
Okay.
So as we as society venture to processing yada bytes of data on a daily basis, meaning we're now approaching yada of some system, we're going to need gigawatts of power in order to make that happen. And where will those gigawatts of power come from to support that load of
So,
yada?
okay, let's just back up for a second.
Yep.
I remember somebody telling me once that a gigabyte is about a 2-hour movie stored on a disk. So that's about as much data.
Hmm.
And maybe you disagree with that. So now walk me up and tell me, just as a frame of reference, how much data is a terabyte? Is that like 4 days of movies? How big is a terabyte?
Oh wow. Yeah, that's gonna a terabyte into probably 24 hours. I'd have to do some math. I'm not
Okay, all
real
right.
fast, but if it, yeah,
Well,
24 hours of
I,
movies
I
stored
asked.
on a system, or if you could do two gigabyte, no, that's gonna be more than that.
Well, if a gigabyte's a 2-hour movie and a terabyte is 1,000 times bigger, then that's 2,000 hours of movies.
Mm-hmm.
And what's 1,000 times bigger than a terabyte? Is that a petabyte? Is
Petabyte,
that what?
petabyte. You're getting into petabytes at that point.
So now we're looking at, that's 2,000. That's like 2 million hours. Okay, think about that.
Yep.
A terabyte is 2 million hours of high resolution movies.
Yep.
Now, if I were to take 2 million, that's a million movies. So that's a million movies. And how in the world? Okay. And then so Yoda, YOTTA.
Yep. Yeah. Yep.
And this is going to be probably, if I remember right, there's like stages above petabytes, which is just, I don't even know, is Yoda even a thing? Is it possible to have a Yoda byte of data, or is that just like, you know, too big a number?
No, it'll be possible. We will absolutely reach there, probably in our lifetime. We will reach that point where we have yada bytes, and then we're looking at higher resolution, better quality, more video storage. And so it becomes more of a, where do you store the back end systems, right? So if you just take a company like Netflix, where do they store all of the movies and videos and content? But then you have to deliver that at high speed to the person that wants to watch it. And so that's where they have what you would consider like an edge data center, more locally or centrally to the person using it. And I'll give you an example. One of the I went to was in the Maldives. They were building a data center, if you can picture the Maldives and the island structure,
No
right?
idea. Okay. So look, see the map? See the map behind you?
Yep.
Show our listeners, show our viewers where the Maldives are.
Oh,
And
the
not that
Maldives
not that I certainly know, but they don't. Yeah,
right here,
exactly
right
right.
there,
See, I'm
right?
surprised. I'm surprised that nobody knew where the Maldives were. Obviously, there it is, right there. So you were there. And by the way, that map behind you, are those
Yes,
pins on that map?
there are pins all over that map.
And that's
Correct.
all the places that you've been
Those are all the places that I've been. That I've
putting in data centers, or just wandering around?
A little of both, Jeff. I mean, there's some wandering on it, but no, a lot of those places are places that I have went to work with data center managers all over the world, just to understand their facilities, how equipment gets into their facilities, and the impact. And by equipment, I mean data, like server switches, storage, and as new equipment comes into their data center spaces, what the impact is to that power envelope or to that shell itself. So
So
I've
when you
toured
were
all over.
7, When
Mhm.
you were 7 on the ranch near
Yeah.
Faith, the youngest of 7 adopted, were you eating breakfast and said, Mom and Dad, I think I'm going to travel the entire globe helping people put up storage units where they store information instead of stuff. Right? Was that ever part of the conversation?
No, I wanted to be a combine crew owner and operator.
Yeah.
That was my 7-year-old because we planted wheat and combine wheat, and I loved it. And that
Yeah.
was my intended goal, was to be a
Yeah, sure.
combine. Yep, and then still run.
Start in the South and work your way all up into
Yep,
Canada.
yep, yep.
I don't even know if
Loved it.
that's a thing anymore, is it?
I think there are still crews,
Yeah,
not as many, right? And it is becoming more
right.
automated in certain ways. But yeah,
I agree with you. I was a dream of mine. What it just it's just kind of like the lifestyle of just
yep,
well, anyway, we're getting off on the tangent. So
yeah. But
we
no,
were
I
talking
had
about
no.
you were talking about the Maldives.
Yep.
Continue on.
So what you have there is the need, right? And I chuckle at this one because there's the need for me to go on vacation in the Maldives to take anybody. But when I'm there, I have to have fast content of my Netflix, my YouTube, my email. And so you have that edge data center sitting on the main island, Mali, in the Maldives, so that if I'm on one of those islands enjoying myself, I'm not really enjoying myself, I'm still connected back to the world. So I have all my speeds, and that's the delivery. So they have submarine cable delivered to a lot of the islands, but that's the data center. So you take it from going back to your larger
Submarine
movies
cable, you mean like laying cable across the floor of the ocean? Is
across
that
the
what you're
floor of
saying?
the ocean. Mm-hmm.
Because for God's sake, when I go to the Maldives, I specifically want to go to see God's creation. But I'm
Yep,
not going to go unless I can get instant email access and watch movies in the hotel room.
correct.
Okay. That sounds very, very, I would say American, but maybe everybody's like that.
That's my personal take as to why that data. Now there are other reasons. I mean, they deliver other content to the locals and so forth, but most of the locals aren't as beneficial as we are to have the technologies.
Or silly. Maybe they say,
Or
do
silly.
I need to watch Netflix? I got a job to do, but oh well. All right.
Yep. Yep. And I
Okay.
can go sit there and work remote and still be connected. I mean, I spent multiple days there. But that's all over the world. I've been to Alaska. I've been to, again, Australia. I've been to the Middle East, and it's all the same thing, right? We want instant
So
access to our stuff.
when the last time I heard the word, gigawatts was watching Back to the Future when I was told that to get it is like 1.1 gigawatts or gigawatts of power.
Yes.
How much is a gigawatt? Help me as I talked about a gig was about a 2-hour movie. How big a unit is a gigawatt?
Ooh. I don't even think in South Dakota we consume a gigawatt of power entirely. I know like
Wow.
the community of Linux takes all the users today. So there's what 2,400 people that live in the city of Linux in the
Okay.
proper.
Okay.
The city itself, plus all the industry, plus all the schools, consume about 10 megawatts, a little under 10 megawatts, maybe a little over 10 megawatts of power.
Okay.
So then you get to 100 megawatts. So 1,000 megawatts is a gigawatt.
Wow.
So
Now, the state
mathematics.
of South Dakota has about 900,000 people, and not quite. If you were to just,
Mhm.
your Joe listener, Joe viewer out there, Lennox is a little town of about 2,400, and
Yep.
that takes about 10 megawatts. Now, Lennox is, a typical small town, not a ton of manufacturing, but some manufacturing. There's no energy hogs in Lennox that I can
Correct.
think of. And the entire state of South Dakota does not burn up a gigawatt. And you're telling me our obsession with storing stuff is adding up to stacks and stacks of gigawatts. What you might
Now,
know the answer to this. I certainly don't. What is that? What does that cost? I mean, if when I get my electric bill, thankfully it doesn't say gigawatts on it. I go, holy cow, we got to stop. Turn off the lights. What are we doing here? We're not
yep.
making energy here. So what's it? what does it cost, dollars and cents wise, to store that?
It costs so much that some of the places in Texas are billing the customers who are gigawatt users on a weekly basis. They don't get a monthly bill, they get a weekly bill in order to pay the consumption that they have there. I mean, the cost to doing this is uh, the cost. And this is where we start to,
Okay, so hold on just a
yeah,
second. You're
yeah,
telling me that in Texas, an individual customer, just a guy, a person, a company,
a company. Hmm.
is using a gigawatt of energy. Did you say a week?
Well, they're using a gigawatt of power, right?
Yeah.
Is the design. So how much of that they're consuming. So let's just say I've built a facility or a campus. Think of it more like a campus. I've built a data center campus,
Hmm.
and on that campus, all the buildings combined have the capability to pull a gigawatt of power or more, right? So my house has a 200 amp, so I can pull maybe maybe
Sure.
you know up up to 100 watts,
Before
right?
you
Or
before you blow a fuse, right? So that
right,
you want
right.
okay.
So it's all about how it's
Yeah,
provisioned, all the breakers upstream, the power
right.
of the subs, etc. So you have one customer whose campus, and there's multiple of these, is
There's
is being
multiple of these.
designed to consume this much power. So the cost starts to be a whole different game. And that's where we then approach into the whole AI, right? AI topic. But if we
Okay,
just
now
stay with
I
storage, yep,
I asked Booker if he could pull this up, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but I said, Booker, can you get us a map of the United States and just put a little dot for where all these data centers are? How many are there in the United States?
there's an unknown number, right? So if yeah, there is an unknown number of the different types and sizes. So there is a map out there that exists that talks about it, that a firm put together based upon generators that they were able to track to a location. So it would show 5 data centers in South Dakota.
Yeah.
And of those 5 data centers, I personally know of 12 in Sioux Falls alone and 2 under construction, but they're enterprise data centers. So that's where we start to discuss what is the data center, the purpose of that facility. What is the purpose
So,
and what's
so
the efficiency?
yes. So there's somebody like we were just talking about storage of everybody's stuff,
Yep.
but I imagine there's somebody who says, "I want my own super private data center to store whatever I want on it," and
My
that would be
enterprise
right.
facility. Hmm.
Okay.
Or medical. A medical
Mhm.
has to be in order to meet the regulations
Right.
and
Right.
so forth, have to have their own private, right?
Hmm.
That can't be stored in co-locations that are not. So when you
Right. Right.
go into a data center, they have to be in their own unique systems. Absolutely.
Okay.
So
Well,
there's
this
an
is just, I mean, it's sort of like, holy cow, what is living in my basement? I have no idea what this thing that I've heard anecdotally people talk about. Wow, it's so if I'm living in Texas and I open up the newspaper or whatever I get my news from, and I says, oh, there's like 20 data centers that they want to put under construction, which means they're all going to want a gigabyte gigawatt, I'm sorry, gigabyte a watt. And now I have to imagine how many power lines do I got to stream across the state to provide that? And then what's going to provide the energy to make that go down the power lines? It's sort of like learning that they're going to put a stadium next to my house that's going to require, roads so 100,000 people a day can go watch this game that I didn't even know existed. Uh,
hmm
Another analogy, maybe it's not accurate, but what talk about that?
Yeah, no, and that's where the intention, right? That's where the intention of what is that data center to do? What is it going to be utilized for is the critical missing piece in a lot of this. If this is the hyperscale leaning on AI and they're trying to train and so forth, that's where it gets okay. Are we doing it right? That's even a lot of the politicians will say, how do we do it right? How do they bring their own power? Versus like the 2 that I mentioned that are being built here in Sioux Falls that I know of that are just small facilities. They're for research and they're for enterprise story of their own office data, right? Their users and their networks and whatever it might be, right? So, what is the intention of that facility and the size? That we have to understand, because that's where the uh, true discussion can begin. Because if it is, right, a hyperscale and they want a gig of power to do their campus, or even 100 megawatts of power to do their campus, that's larger than a lot of communities. So as we look at that, where should it go? How should they get the power? What is the benchmark? What does that community even have, right? So I look at Lennox and I know, and I've given my city council members, here's the power that we have. And this is the cap that we have. Before, again, basic, you're going to start popping fuses. So after this cap, if somebody comes knocking on our door, here's the cap. Everything after that, now they have to build their own. So if you
And
entertain,
now the other
you have
part
a
of that,
benchmark. Hmm.
let's say a guy says, okay, yeah, I'll set up my data center, but I'll provide my own power. I'll just roll in some generators.
Hmm.
And how many generators that are going to be burning fuel will it take for me to provide that? And you have, well, what? It's going to be, you'll need 10,000 generators. I made that up, but maybe I'm not making it up. The amount of generators required is enormous. And in the meantime, they're all fossil fuel burning. So there's going to be noise, and then there's going to be a cloud of smoke out of this stuff. And so if I'm in the middle of, nowhere America, and a guy comes up and says, yeah, I'm just going to buy some land out here.
Hmm.
And I think there's a code that exists for addressing that, right? I mean, in the history of mankind, who would ever think that a guy would need a company that needs, 1,000 generators? Is this describing some of the problem that we're seeing?
Yeah, because what has happened, it's path of least resistance over the last, even 5 years is path of least resistance. Okay, well, I'm not going to get power from the grid, so I'm going to go over and get it from natural gas, because natural gas is abundant and around. So I'm going to get it from that. Well, in the middle there was, well, diesel's available, so I'll just do diesel, right? And the industry is going through, and that's where you'll lean in on things like a social accord and climate accord, but it was path of least resistance. I'm going to go find a piece of land. I'm going to get what's available to me, whether that's diesel generators, gas generators, and I'm going to pop them up as needed in order to get there. And so we take a step back, and that's where you're seeing, to me, a lot of moratoriums around, hey, let's study this a little bit better. Let's make sure that whatever that is, that design fits in that community, right? That it's not all of a sudden a whole bunch of diesel generators sitting next to a high school that are popping on every hour, right? Because they need that power. Also in the industry, we're looking at it. Do we need to have in some of these training for AI training? Do they need to be redundant, right? That facility doesn't need to have redundant power. It just needs to have power while doing training models. So can I deliver data, um, the infrastructure differently? But should it be located next to a community, or should it be out by faith, right? Where black smoke in the middle of the day on a diesel generator isn't going to be any different than the 4 tractors that started, right? It fits better in proper places. Other places people are leaning in on, you go into dairy barns or so forth, where they have methane gas. Maybe I can drive some off of methane gas, and so I locate near. So the proximity to something that may already exist, we're just not doing those studies and doing that research and identifying the properness, right? But maybe a smaller facility located near a community that you'll never notice. I always tell people, I come to work up Tallgrass Road coming off the T exit, and I know of at least 5 data centers that I drive by, big, small, and different, on the way to my office. And it's a 15-minute drive, right?
And this could be something, again, like we talked about the size of a couple of refrigerators. Is that called a data center, or does it have to be bigger to be called that?
No, those are like data rooms, so like little computer rooms, or because everybody's going to, I mean, a lot of like medical clinics. We did one where they had 1,300 rooms. Go to an airport, they have a lot of little closets that have 1 or 2 or 3 racks of these, like, refrigerator things, but they're racks, computer
Hmm.
racks that
Hmm.
have equipment that's important. But there may be like 20 rooms across an airport to support that local area. So
Ah,
those are also in our view to make sure that they're running efficiently. Then you get to the central place, which that falls in, and that's usually, 10, 20, 200, 2,000 racks. That gets to be more like a data center.
And how big is that room?
They vary in size anywhere. So if you got 2 racks, that might be 40 square feet. And I've been in data centers where they're 100 square feet, 1,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet, a million
I've
square
seen
feet.
this on the spy movies where they walk down and sneak you know what I'm talking about. Everybody
Uh,
has
uh,
seen that
yep,
dark room with the black glass
yep.
boxes, right?
I've been in
So,
facilities where you can't see the other end across the
wow,
world.
wow.
That's how far and dense and dark they can be.
And they kick out heat, which
Generate
is
heat.
part of the
Power creates heat. Always.
yeah.
Yep.
And so some people say, well, that's why we need to build these where it's naturally cold, so it will cost us less to cool them. Somebody said, and I absolutely agree with this, it's only waste heat if it can't be used. Is anybody putting these things next to somebody who could use the heat? I'm heating a building or processing food. I don't know. I mean, is anybody saying, can we use the heat that's being generated for people who need it?
So I'll take you in history. There are several places, like I was in Switzerland, the sauna, where they're actually taking lake water and bringing the lake water in at a certain level, running that through all their systems, getting it repurified before they put it back in the lake. So it's a closed loop using the lake. The heat similar. I've seen greenhouses attached to facilities to utilize that heat. Community pools. The economics haven't been there in the past. There are a lot of like special one-off projects that
Yeah.
that community did in order. It goes back to the industry, right? Is only exist to solve the problem of somebody else. And so the industry has just been build new, add more, keep going, build more, add new, keep going. And that is where we're, based on the light that's been spotted on the industry, having to take a little bit of a step back to find the inefficiencies or possibilities, right? Getting engineering students. I've had the fortune to talk to Sanford engineering students over the last few weeks around just starting to study what does this even mean and how do we change it. There's a group out there called iMasons or infrastructure masons who are a consortium of some of the largest industry players that are focused on these two topics. And that's where I refer to the social accord and climate accord kind of thing and to what that actually
It
means.
I recall from my earlier days about, the environment. If you have a lake that's got, 34-degree water in it and using it cool, and now the lake is, 38 degrees, what does that do to the things that are living in the lake? Some animals
Mhm.
require that cold temperature. So it's not, it's I guess it's heat pollution, right?
So they have to, in order to put it back in the lake, get it back to the same temperature that it came in. So they have a holding pond to release it. So they come in at a lower level and put the water back out at a different. And they're doing their whole camp. So it's not just the data center. They're doing their entire college campus
So it just
using the
goes into this
system.
enormous pool outside, and then the heat goes into the atmosphere, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
Yep.
right. So,
Yep. And then the water goes back into the lake, so you don't have that negative impact on the lake life, essentially, the marine life. Yep.
uh,
That was 10 years
Bitcoin,
ago, by the way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Bitcoin, a datum,
Yeah.
I have a coin. I mean, what? Okay, I'm way over my skis. What in the world is causing the need for so much energy to make cryptocurrency?
I have my own opinions, and my opinions around cryptocurrency and that are different than most, and well, probably not different than most, but in a way that I'm not a big fan of it. And if I ever had somebody come to our city council and say, "Hey, I'm going to bring a Bitcoin mining operation here," and they called me, I would say, avoid it with everything you got. Don't let it come here, because their mindset around crypto mining is burn it till it's done and then throw it away, because I'm gold rushing. I'm mining for something out there that I hope to find, but the equipment that I'm using is just going to be burnt out. And once it burns it out, I throw it away. it's just not a sustainable model in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion, right?
Okay. And your opinion is the reason I'm talking to you, so I get it. I mean, by the way, comment, suggest, like, share. I mean, this is strictly one guy, and you've already figured out how smart I am, talking to a guy who's a little bit smarter. And if you have other opinions, let me know. We'll get them interview those later on down the road. But in the meantime, uh, again, I understood about 20% of what you said.
Sure.
Burn it up and use it. I guess you're saying the equipment they have is not designed for a long shelf life. What are we
Yeah.
talking about here?
So let's say I get a laptop, right? So I
Hmm.
get a car, I get a laptop, and I'm going to take that laptop and I'm going to burn it as hard and fast. So I'm going to run as much processing on it till that machine dies.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to throw it away and I'm going to get another one to replace it. I'm going to do
Okay.
the exact same thing.
Okay.
And that's what I find happen in a lot of these Bitcoins is they just burn the CPUs and GPUs, or mostly CPU. They burn them up
A
until they're
CPU,
non-usable.
a CPU. I
Like a
can't
central
believe how many people
processing unit.
don't.
The
What's that again?
central processing unit
Okay.
inside of your laptop.
Okay.
That's what makes it operations work.
So another metaphor, and again, I remember as a kid, I had a little motor that ran on a 1.5 volt battery. You
Uh-huh.
could hook it up to a 9 volt battery and it worked like crazy till it smoked and burned up.
Yep.
Similar thing, overdriving it. Don't care if it burns out. I'll just get another one.
Yep. So
Okay.
so my ranching analogy, I would say it like this. We get a because I'm hard hearing because of the 40/20 I drove from the age of 8 to 14, right? Really loud. And every other year you wound up trying to do an overhaul on the engine because you farmed away at the thing. And so it's the same analogy as I'm going to take that tractor, I'm going to hook as big a plow into it, disc, whatever, until that tractor burns. And I'm not going to repair it. I'm just gonna go get another one, and I'm gonna burn that
Uh,
one, and go get
okay.
another one, burn that one, repeat.
Well, now Bitcoin, if I understand correctly, and called, data mining, whatever, they're trying to come up with this really, really long, complex number that can't be broken, that's secure, and you're buying that as an investment. Is that am I describing that
Yeah,
accurately?
and I don't spend a lot of time in it in Bitcoin mining or Bitcoin operations simply because of
Right.
my varying opinions, and I don't do a lot of crypto myself. I do understand data centers. I understand the basic concept of how they're designed and operate. But I also know they have left a big black eye on the industry itself, the data center industry, because of how they've been set up, and then the size, the noise, the factors, where they've located, all those things have left to me a black eye on our industry when
So,
we're really trying to lean in on the data center need for research, true genuine research, true genuine mining. Right? I have a son who graduated from Hopkins and is Johns Hopkins in Baltimore and is doing ALS, early detection type research, and he needs modeling and research and compute equipment and power and people like that to be able to do those studies more effectively.
hmm,
So that's where we need to focus our time. But
what's the deal with China? Everybody says we got to get these because of China. I said, what's China? What's this about?
so that comes to the compute race. Like as we get into robotics and we get into the human capital, there's a lot of different in my readings and learnings, a lot of different understanding around where are we going to get human capital to do the jobs within the plants and factories. So if you take the semiconductor, like your RAM that goes inside, so the memory that goes inside of your computer, right? There's a shortage of people who are able to work or willing to work in plants. So in order to get systems put in place, we need the robotics built, but to build the robotics, we need the back end engines or data centers. And in that race, right, for AI to help figure out how to do these things better, faster, cheaper, etc., the race comes down to who's going to win the dominance around artificial call it intelligence manufacturing, will that be China or will that be the US? Because the presumption is that those who dominate that race will be the world leader continuing to go forward. And that's my basic understanding is if, quote unquote, we don't win that race, then we will lose dominance in the world because they will
I'm
have
not
better.
I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying that I have seen that or have heard that song before.
Yep.
There's a couple of ways that if I want to get my project through the local population, I'll do two things. I'll say, think of the
Yep.
jobs we're going to create. Now, for why we're building this, we're going to create all of these jobs. Okay, all right. And then the other one is if we don't do it, then they're going to do it, and then we'll lose. And
Yep.
everybody's competitive. Well, I don't want to lose. So
Yep.
let's do it because they're doing it. It's kind of like when you're walking through the store and the guy next to you is walking just a little bit faster. Before you know it, you're running like whatever. It's because it's the competitive nature of people.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I can't say that is wrong. I'm just also noticing I've heard others do that before, and it turned out that really was just a paper tiger.
I agree with you. I also lean in on just recently there was an announcement from the administration that came out and said, in order to win this race, data centers must and will bring their own power. And that
Uh,
sounds great to people that want to hear that message. My pause, right, going back to kind of like, hey, you got to have a healthy dose of skepticism when
yeah,
you
yeah.
hear things, right? My pause there is that meaning that regulation or deregulation of utilities will start to occur in a way that if I'm a hyperscaler, I can just walk into a community and say, hey, I need to build this facility. I've brought my own power. We're going to go ahead and set things up. Right. And is that what we're going to see? Because do we really want that either? I don't know. That's a question that we need to take pause and understand better as to what that will actually mean. So
Yeah, so
on the surface,
planning
it
and
sounds
zoning.
great.
Planning and zoning. In my neighborhood, you can't put
Hmm.
up a business until it gets zoned for business.
Yep.
But you can put up a house of worship or a church anywhere you can, and that you can do that.
Hmm.
And that's fine. And you know, so what I guess I'm hearing you say is that they might throw data centers also as something that doesn't have to go through the local, bell hoops to jump over. And all of a sudden you go, whoop, whoop, whoop. Wait a minute now. What can go next door? Oh, this can go next door because we've already passed a law and it's okay. And you go, ooh, I didn't know about that. Right.
Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm not saying that's what happened. I just have that healthy dose of skepticism to say, hey, at surface level, the things that we hear mean one thing, but the reality of what might happen is something we need to pay close
Uh,
attention to, right? It's so I'm not saying, and that's where back in our community, I'm working as close as I can with my city council members, my friends, my neighbors, to understand this is what we have. This is what we have today. So if somebody comes knocking, I don't care whether it's a boot barn or whether it's a cowhide factory or whether it's a data center. This is what we have to work with, and this is the limitations that we need around this new whatever it is, right? And if it is a data center, this is my expertise. This is the things that you need to put in place that don't exist, like a new zoning ordinance. What does that even mean and look like? Here's how we can build it and be one of some of the first, right? So let's move past the talk of studying it, not studying it, but move past the talk of talking about understanding it and let's get to understanding it. So we know where we sit in the digital age going forward as a community.
mm-hmm.
And can that bring anything back to our community in a positive light or not? Because they do bring data centers will bring some jobs during the construction and design phase, minimal during the operational phase, right? That's what most everybody talks about is to actually operate the is minimal, but thankful to that, I've been able to create a company here in Sioux Falls that employs 40 employees with one customer here in South Dakota. we're able to build a company that supports data centers globally, right? So we've been the beneficiary of the opposite, where yes, data centers can be managed remotely. We just did it remotely from South Dakota.
So your business is data centers.
Our
You make
our
you
business is software. We're a software company
okay.
that data centers use to understand their processes of new IT equipment, servers, switches, storage,
Mhm.
cabinets, power strips that come into their data center as designed, and what will that impact to that building be? That's what our software helps people understand. So think of very simple. I've got a garage and I'm a storage garage and I've got 15 boats sitting outside. If I try to shove them all in that 40 by 60, it's not going to work, right? Unless I build shelves up. So that's what our software essentially does, is help a customer understand, here's all the things that you have in your data centers across your global footprint. Here's things that may not need to be in there anymore, right? So you can shut them down and recapture that power. Um, when this new gear comes in, here's where you should put it based upon a whole host of
Mhm.
variables into those locations. And that's what our software helps our customers understand.
Well, I'm in the process of talking to the leaders of the world, Scott, and I'm willing to give you all of the power necessary to use your limited capacity, but also a product knowledge. What's like one or two things you do to kind of, address all of this stuff?
Ooh, first thing I would do is I would control budget on purchase of IT equipment to ensure that everything is purchased is utilized most efficiently. Because I find stuff that just sits in storage room. I find stuff that's not even being used to its full potential on spaces that shouldn't even be there. So the first thing I would do is I would help control budget and the outcome of that expenditure in relationship to a facility. That'd be the first thing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a little bit. So,
Mhm.
for example, let's say, and you see in the background, I got reams of paper,
Yep.
and my paper guy says, "Well, Jeff, if you bought just four more reams of paper, I could give you a 40% discount." That sounds good. I'll just put
Hmm.
them on the shelf. The difference being is that this paper has a very, very long shelf life. But if I'm using technology, if I get those four more reams of technology, they will become useless in 5 years and need to be tossed away. Is that what you're talking about?
Essentially, yep. Essentially, that's
Yeah.
what I'm saying is just because I got budget of $1 million doesn't mean I should spend $1 million on new IT equipment unless I absolutely have, because there's a fear that if I don't spend, I won't get next year, right?
Ah,
So I've got to use my budget. That would be my magic wand that I would wave to
yeah.
start and stop some of the quickest inefficiencies.
By the way, I've given your title the IT czar. Scott, congratulations. You're now the IT czar I don't care about the rest of the world, just America. No, I'm kidding. I'll make you IT czar of the world. What's the next thing?
Then I would look at the systems themselves. I would get right down to anywhere that the provision space of a building and how it's being utilized, because we have power provision to facilities. So I get a 5 megawatt building and I only need to use 2 megawatts. Well, that other 2 megawatts could be utilized for something else for a period of time somewhere else, right? So just transparency is where I take into what is provisioned against what is actually being utilized, and acknowledgement of that so we can continue to utilize it better, right? Now that's where
Well,
some
I,
of
I
the
have I have bad news because nobody likes to do this, but you know what I need? You know what I need? What you're telling me is if I got an energy engineer in my little town and I paid him or her like 80 grand a year to do that.
Mhm.
I don't want to spend 80 grand. But if I'm hearing it right, that person could save me, three times or whatever. So you got to spend money to save money. I guess. Boy, this
the whole
just goes against everything in my taxpayer bones. But there it is, huh?
we're in it together, and that's where the problem, going back to that yada conference and so forth, is is we're in this together, right? At the end of the day. And I go back to how did I get here? And that goes back to you mentioned the cattle world and life is in 2007, it was my crossroads of life. Either buy an auction barn and become an auction barn owner, which I'm glad I did not because the gentleman that runs it does the most magnificent job, 1,000 times better than I ever would have. But I did something else and I got into data centers because I was curious. Now I just have fell into this bucket of knowledge that I'll share with anybody that wants to listen.
So I call it behind the curtain. I talk to people, and
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of experience in all phases of life. If you could say to somebody, and this could be on travel, this could be on airports, this could be on countries, this could be about data. What's a little something that you could tell somebody that would help them in their life? For example,
Yeah.
if you were a mechanic and you saw this particular car was a lemon, you would say, yeah, don't ever buy that car. Or if you were a siding salesman, you'd say, I'd never buy this kind of siding. It deteriorates in this weather. This is the kind of stuff I'm asking you to share with us.
For me is curiosity. It is be curious about anything and everything and never feel like the know-it-all of anything. Right? The more that you can lean in on just being curious to learn more about whatever the topic is, life will treat you well. And
Wow.
that's how I
I
live.
feel like that's what I'm doing right now. I feel like, hey, I'm doing what he said. All right, good.
We have a tendency, and that goes, the school board life in me we have a tendency to look at students and try to get them to figure it out before graduation day. And I want, as I work with students and we're doing some programs, is no, yeah, you can start somewhere, but be curious every
Mm.
day and take action on some of that curiosity because before you know it, 25, 30 years has gone by and you look back and like, oh, I guess that's what I'm going to do with my life, right? It just happens. So
Hmm.
every day you wake up curious about something is a good day to be alive.
Well, we're getting to the end. This is it. This is your one
All right.
question. Everybody gets to ask one question
All right.
and one question only. So I hope you've planned and thought about this one question that you get to ask me, Scott. Just one.
Okay.
Are you ready? And what is the question?
All right. I am ready. And the question is, if you had one moment to relive in your life, what would it be and why?
Well, you talked about your parents, right?
Hmm.
7 kids adopted. You were in it. You didn't even know what it was about. And you probably wasn't paying any attention. I've said this, somebody asked me a similar question. I'd come home from school. I'd be hungry. I was the youngest in my family. And I'd say, I'm hungry, Mom. And she baked bread once a week. She'd bake 6 loaves.
Same. Yep.
She'd slice some bread. And then she said, well, hang on a second. She'd go out to the hen house, get a couple of eggs. She'd open the refrigerator. And in the refrigerator was a side of bacon that she had cured. And she'd take the dish towel off it and she'd set it on the counter and take a cleaver and whack off some thick slices of bacon. And she'd open the refrigerator and take out the strawberry preserves that she had made. She'd cook that all up for me. Ha! Scott, I'd go back and I'd say thank you because I didn't.
Yep.
I just ate it. And I think I might have said, well, what's for supper? Right? I mean,
Yep.
just to appreciate the people in your lives. Find the way to say thank you. And to realize I'll never come back to this day. Again, when this day is gone, it's gone. And to drink in the wonder, No, of course, every life has its difficulties. I'm sure there's times in my life that, uh, maybe I wasn't a good son and maybe they weren't good parents, but that's not what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the common, ordinary kindness that my parents gave me and how I wished I could go back and somehow pour into them how grateful I've been. Yeah.
I love that, Jeff. I live and I try to explain this to my children and to others around it. I'm a mistake. I always tell them I'm a mistake. There was two individuals that had an accident, but yet they gave me life.
Uh,
There was two other individuals that decided to raise me in their life. And life started with gratitude. And that's the only way I can start. Followed up with curiosity, and that's got me to where I am today. So I love that. Love that answer
I
you have.
have to honor your parents on the whole concept of adoption because that is a risky thing, isn't it? Right? They are taking a person into their family. They are part of the family, and now it's a risk because they're not just raising you for a few years. You are part of the family for the rest of their lives, and I just honor those who are willing to do that because honestly, I know some circumstances that it didn't really turn out that well.
Absolutely. We were seven, and as some of my siblings got older, they went back to their family. Right? They've left. That's
You were adopted at the age of 7.
I was adopted at the age of six
Oh,
months.
boy.
6 months. I was 6 months when I came, and so were three of my siblings that I'm
I
still
see.
very close with today. My oldest sibling was killed in a car wreck years ago, but then three of the siblings were biological, and they went back to their family over time. So yeah, life is been full of ups and downs, but it's still, as you mentioned, my mother baked bread all the time. We walk
Mm.
through the door and there's fry bread or homemade bread. I can relate to that story so deep in my heart, because that would be a life that, as a kid, very much took for granted. But people, including myself, would pay money to go back and live or try
Yeah.
to live again, right? So simple, so loving. Came home from school, caught my horse and went for a ride, right? That was the after school.
Come
Um,
home from school, catch your horse, and go for a ride.
yep.
You could be like a movie character. Some people like that. What was the name of the horse?
Oh, I had lots of them. So it's the funny story is later in life, my dad started to pawn my dad, and I always tell people, they always ask, did you ever want to meet your biological? And I have met my biological. I have a huge family, wonderful family that have welcomed me in on many levels later in life. But my adoptive family that I am so blessed to have been part of, um, yeah, we had many troubles, right? But our horses, we raised 40 Morgan horses. And a
Oh,
horse had a way of life with my father, which was we would break them to ride. If they're really good, we'd either sell them to somebody, but if they just wanted to buck, because I had really good bronc riding brothers, they would go to our arena and we would buck them. If they didn't buck well, they made a road trip, right? That was so later in life, my dad asked why we didn't like to ride some of the horses he still had on the ranch. And we said, it's like this, Dad. We didn't have a lot, but we had the best horse. We had the Cadillac. And when you want us to get in the Toyota, when we know there's a Cadillac, it doesn't go well. And it wasn't until later in life where he really caught that. So we had all kinds of horses, but our favorite horses like Jim, Jigs, Nels. It was just a list of them. Nibbles was our pony that we all started riding on. So, then of course had our Shetland, and it was, but 40 horses. We spun them with six breeding mares, and then five boys. You can imagine other people brought horses for us to break every spring. So it was a rotation of all kinds of horses and fun and injuries. And
how's your
yeah,
back?
my back is fine. My back is fine. My older brother was a collegiate champion bronc rider.
Mm.
He's been beat up pretty bad. I mean, he got ran over by a tractor as a kid and other things. So my sister is still nursing. She just broke her ankle team roping here. She's a little older than I, but she'll be back on a horse as soon as she can be. I'm the only one that really hasn't stuck to the horses, but my sister, she's on them every day, her and her family. So It's our way or
We
what.
we had a conversation with a bronc rider. I'm sorry, a bull rider.
Okay.
50 concussions, and he's a he's super interesting guy. And I will just say, Scott, to say, I started this. I started this project. I like to interview interesting people about interesting things, and my premise is that people will come along for the ride. What I did not anticipate is I just kind of feel like we could be friends, right? I mean, is
Um,
when you talk to people you don't really know well, and you talk about interesting things, there is a connection that I deeply, deeply appreciate. So thank you so much for your time, Scott, here today.
Thank
Hmm.
you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I love the answer to your question. It takes me right back to the warm bread sitting on the
yeah,
every day. So
yeah,
thank you. Thank
yeah,
you, Jeff. And yes, I agree.
yeah,
Definitely could be friends and more coffee.
yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm Jeff Gould, America's storyteller, with Scott Sandal, the genius, the IT czar, recently appointed by me. He has no pay with that. He has no authority. It will take him nowhere, but it really looks good on a plaque on his desk. Until we talk again, God bless.